So good morning, everybody. My name is Judy Feldhausen, and I'm here today with Bob Wischmeier, my real good friend. And we are going to continue our series on self-improvement with Les Brown's book, The Law of Success. And we are on chapter 3 today. It's called Let Go of Your Fear. Very, very interesting chapter, and a lot of introspective time, at least for me, about this chapter. How about for you, Bob?
Yeah, the same, Judy. It caused me to do a lot of reflection on the past. Interestingly enough, looking back at things, life events and career choices, decisions, that I've made through the years. Like a lot of us on the call, we're not kids anymore. We're not just initially launching ourselves into the world, and certainly this whole subject of letting go of your fear had some powerful effect on me as I read through it. Let me, if you don't mind, I wanted to lead out just a little bit this morning, you guys, when we talk about this whole thing. In life, there are so many times when we almost feel like we hit a wall. We come up against something that just stops us short, and most of the time that's fear. It's like the number one obstacle that stops people from achieving their goals, stops people from moving forward, is that, quite frankly, we're afraid. We become afraid. And it's a lot of stuff. We sort of continue to trudge along through life doing what we're doing just because we're afraid to make a change or make an adjustment. Not uncommon. It's pretty natural for most of us. There are those who have no fear. You look at guys like Mark Comer and Dan Higginson, some of our top people in our company who just, they're just entrepreneurial spirits, and they move and they shake. But most of us are pretty regular, pretty normal. And so we run into things from time to time. We're afraid of being rejected. We're afraid to break out of our old habits. And so that's really what stops us from moving forward. And I really appreciated Les Brown in this particular chapter. He uses the word fear as an acronym: false evidence appearing real. And I thought, that is just so true. Most of our fears really are rooted in some kind of a bias that we carry around with us. We can't move past certain things in our lives, and I think that's really true. And as I mentioned, Judy, just a moment ago, this has caused me to do some reflection. I've looked back through my life and the fears as a man, as a father, as a husband, that I faced, and I thought, there's so much truth to this. If I go back to when Bonnie and I, we've been married for nearly 46 years, so it goes back quite a long ways. But as a young man, I went into business pretty early in my life. I dropped out of college and I went into business. And for a while, I worked in the trades. I worked in a cabinet shop for a number of years. But then I bought a business along with a partner in Montana. We moved to Western Montana, and we started a business together. He and I, we built this thing up from practically nothing to a really vibrant and great business. And there was a long period of time there where I really excelled in my business. I was really good at what I was doing, but I had this unbelievable fear that I couldn't do anything else. I had this fear that, I didn't finish my degree. I can't do this. Is it. This is all I'm going to be able to do in life. And then we reached a point in the business where we were top heavy and we had to make some adjustments. And all of a sudden, all the comfort, I had 5 children at that point in time, and had to make a change. And it was like, I can do other things, and left the business, sold my interest in the business, and moved forward. And then for years, I had another job where I was an operations director for a company for a lot of years. And I realized as that company sold, another company bought us out. Part of the buyout meant that I had to go on with this new company in a leadership position again. I did so, and even though I didn't care for the company, I knew I could do it at that juncture. That false evidence appearing real had disappeared from me because I had conquered it when I left one occupation, one career path to follow another. And that led to another job later that I excelled in and loved very much. And that led me to Synergy Worldwide. So we go through life and with these fears that, oh, I can't do that. I can't learn anything new. You know, it's frightening or whatever. But it's not true. I mean, it is true, but we can overcome it. I worked with a man for many years who used to say, who was just a pain in the neck. He was just an ornery old man. And he used to say to me, "You're just a dreamer." And I used to think to myself, yeah, I am. And I'm going to dream a dream that's twice my size. I am a dreamer, and there's nothing wrong with that. Judy?
That is so great. And you're so right, Bob. I remember being a new distributor and looking at the successful people in the business and then looking at myself and saying, well, I'm never going to be successful like them because, you know, I don't have the history they have. I don't have the natural personality that they have, the friendliness, that I don't have the empathy that they have. I'm not as tall as them, so I'm not powerful because being, you know, I am vertically challenged. And because of that, you know, in my mind, it was, well, people look up to them. They can't look up to me. You know, that was a fear. And one of the ways that I overcame that is that I did most of my meetings sitting down. Because then
you're just as tall as everyone else when you're sitting down, aren't you?
You know, and I'm actually sometimes taller than other people because I have, you know, I'm tall from my waist up. I just have no legs. So I was at an even keel. And so that was one of the ways that I got rid of that obstacle of not being as tall as other people. Kind of crazy.
Well, kind of crazy, but it makes perfect sense. And it's how we look at things and then we adjust, because that's what we have to do. And I think one of the things, and you guys can tell us or think about this a little bit too, but I think that one of the things that we run into as much as anything else when it comes to moving forward in business or in our personal life is that we settle. We're willing to settle for things. It gets pretty comfortable. Another thing that I've discovered as well is the concern over money. One of my sons, James, lives in Louisville, Kentucky. Well, actually lives in New Albany, Indiana, but he works out of Louisville. And it's a rock solid financial job. You know, I think he told me he's going to make $130,000 this year at his job, but he hates it. He absolutely hates every minute of every day at that job. It's driving him nuts. It's going to kill him. I'm so worried about him. But he stays there, and he stays there because the dollars are so big. And I think that's another obstacle that we face. Again, false evidence appearing real, that thought process that if I don't make six figures, I can't survive in this world. That's just not true. I've lived in rural America almost all of my life. And you don't have to make six figures to survive. So again, we run into these things. You know, the path we're on may be boring, but it's predictable. It feels safe, right? But the other part of that, if I may, is that safe scenario doesn't always last because things happen. That's the way life is. You go along, you think, well, it's okay, everything's okay. And then what happens? You know, the economy busts, the subprime mortgage industry collapses, and the stock market drops, or you get fired from your job, or something else like that occurs. The company that you work for is sold to somebody else, whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden that safe track that you're on, that you're not going to take a step away from it, all of a sudden it disappears. And then what do? Then you have to regroup. Then you have to take a hard look at where you're going. You know, maybe you just feel so inadequate, but you're not. And so again, we come back to that idea that fear is really false evidence. It appears real, but we can do hard things. We, as human beings, we have the capacity to move forward and move past some of these things that seem to loom up in our face and seem so real. We can do that. We can move past that, Judy.
That's so true, because what if everything you have ever wanted is on the other side of that fear? You know, just sit with that for a moment and think about what is your why? Where do you want to be? If the fear was not an obstacle, what would it look like then? What is everything you've ever wanted? And if it is on the other side of the fear, what do you do with it? You know, my son-in-law is in the exact same place that your son is. You know, he's married. He has 3 children. My daughter just got a degree in nursing, so she could help him financially. But he's also making a ton of money. He's the #1 pre-course salesperson in the world, not just in the state or the United States, in the world. And he loves his work, but he hates the company. And he wants to get out so bad, but he feels so stuck, because when you're #1 at something, you're afraid of being #2 at anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's getting to the place where everything he's ever wanted is on the other side of that, and is looking at figuring out ways that he can not be the #1 salesperson anymore, but to do something entirely different. And, you know, I think it's a vision that we all have to kind of step back and look at. Is there something, is fear standing in our way of really what we want to accomplish most in life?
You know, as you were sharing that, Judy, I thought about there's a company that I was aware of, became aware of back in, I think, about 1970, something like that. It was called the Great Pacific Iron Works. It was down on Ventura Avenue in Ventura, California, and they made climbing gear, high-end, you know, state-of-the-art climbing gear. But this was back in 1970. It was a guy named Tom Frost and another guy by the name of Chenard. I can't think of his first name, but anyway, they made the most remarkable climbing gear imaginable. And there came a point in time where Tom was also a professional photographer. They were in Ventura, California, because they liked to surf. It kept them strong and healthy, and they both surfed a lot. They were complete outdoorsmen. And Tom left and went to Denver, actually, as to pursue a degree or to pursue his career in photography. Chenard did some other things with the business. Not only did they sell high-end climbing gear, but he got into selling clothes. And today they're known as Patagonia. And I think probably everyone on this call has heard of Patagonia before, Patagonia Clothing Company. They're still there in Ventura, California. The point that I wanted to make from this is the fact that Tom Frost followed his dream and went to Colorado. Chenard stayed there and followed another dream and created this huge company called Patagonia. But they have a really interesting business protocol. the people who work for them, they're in Ventura, that work there at Patagonia, they can come to work at whatever time they want to, basically. One of the things that the company models is, if there's a good surf, you need to be out there on the water surfing. So go ahead, clock out, go out, surf for a couple of hours, come back and finish out your shift. It's a really easy, really interesting business concept, but the employees, once they hire on there, they never leave. They've got a really remarkable business with those kinds of thoughts in mind. It's really employee oriented. We don't see that very, very often. But anyway, I kind of digress there. But this idea here, this slide that we're all looking at now, how we respond to fear is important. Judy, did you want to share a thought on this? I've got a couple of thoughts as well.
Well, yes. So there's these three choices here. Responding for fear: flight, fight, or freeze. And it's interesting because I get to talk about this slide a lot, which is kind of strange, I guess. But I do cardiovascular screenings with my Synergy business. And in one of the measurements is the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system shows our flight and fight response and our rest and digest response. So depending on what the measurement is, I get to talk to people all the time about how they respond to fear, because it's so important. Are we going to just leave the situation, which was my number one when I was growing up? I would just I just don't want to do it, so I'm just going to leave. Am I going to fight and go through that fear, or am I just going to freeze and not be able to go one way or the other and just feel either incompetent or just absolutely paralyzed with trying to figure out what to do? And I have a girlfriend that actually that was her life's journey, was to freeze everything. Every time something came up with her, what she did was she did nothing, and then decisions were made for her. And she was not happy with the way her life went because she couldn't make a decision. How about you, Bob?
Judy, can you hear me?
Now he's back. So Bob, thank you so much for rejoining us.
I don't know what happened there.
Me either.
Anyway,
But I was just telling everyone that you have a great rattlesnake story, and we'd love to hear it.
Oh, yeah. Sure, I'll share it. When we talk about this response to fear with flight or fight or freeze or whatever, we are all different. And I know that depending on the circumstances, in my life, there have been a lot of times when freeze has been the problem. Not so much flight, but I've been in situations before where I just simply didn't know what to do next. And sometimes that's just a matter of confusion, not understanding, but oftentimes it's like I'm just stuck there. But a lot of the time for me, it's fight. I don't run. I have a propensity to sort of step up, and it came to me as I was reading through this, studying through this last week, that an example is when I was painting my house years ago, and I've mentioned before we have 5 children, and one of my kids, I was up on a ladder, and one of my little boys said, "Dad, there's a snake down here." And I came down off the ladder, and sure enough, we had a rattlesnake in the yard, and it was sort of coiled up right by the edge of the house by a little rock garden area. And so Bonnie was running around trying to find the children. Where's the baby? Where's the baby? Because our littlest boy was just a little toddler. And because I was painting the house, I had some pruning shears there. on the back of the pickup, just laying there, you know, those long-handled pruning shears. And my instant response to a rattlesnake in the yard was just anger. I mean, I was just filled with anger. Like, you're not going to hurt one of my babies. I don't care who you are. And I grabbed a pair of pruning shears of all the crazy things off the back of my truck. I walked right up to that coiled rattlesnake, leaned over, opened those shears up, and caught him right by the head with a pair of pruning shears. And, you know, of course, my family thought I'd lost my mind. It was one of those moments that you never forget ever. But that was my response to that dangerous situation. I didn't freeze. I didn't feel like running. I was just mad. I was ready to fight. It wouldn't have mattered what it was, whether it was a rattlesnake or a grizzly bear. I was fighting mad. And I think it was over my concern for the kids, whatever the case may be. That was my response to that situation. It's not always the same, though. You know, sometimes we do have that. Sometimes we're afraid and something comes up and it's like, I'm out of here. Let's see. Your battery's running low. That must be you, Judy.
I think it is.
Well, my battery's running low once in a while as well, but that has more to do with my health than anything else. Anyway, that was my little rattlesnake story. It sounds sort of silly, but there you have it.
That's a great story. And, you know, I found that there's one other response, and it was one that was taught to me when I was in another network marketing company. And it's one that I would suggest not doing, and that is faking it. And we were taught that if you didn't know the answer to something, that you would make it up, or if you weren't successful, you would pretend you were extremely successful until you became successful, and then you just didn't have to pretend to be successful anymore. And one of the reasons I left that company is that my integrity just would not allow me to do that, to pretend that I was, you know, a millionaire in the company, faking my success when that just was not true. And, you know, I believe that honesty is sometimes fearful, that, you know, admitting your faults and your insecurities is not easy to do, but faking it is not the answer.
Yeah, you know, that reminds me too, early on when I was very first introduced to Synergy Worldwide and really began this journey with the company, I worked with a guy for a long time, and I care for him. I still do. But he was talk all the time about how many millions and millions of dollars that he had made in another industry. And I remember Bonnie and I had a little conversation one time, and Bonnie said, listen, if these guys have made millions of dollars doing this other business, why aren't they still doing that? You know, it's like your lead into every conversation is how rich I used to be doing a different trade. Why not just stay with that? Anyway, it's silliness, but I remember thinking, you know, that's kind of a phony thing, you know, an integrity issue. So I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. We don't fake it. We don't fake it. Yeah, we don't. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's how we respond. So what do we do to face the fear?
Yeah.
And, you know, I really like this, to feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, we do have I believe we have an internal power that that can overcome that feeling of fear, and it is fierce, just like you with the rattlesnake. That idea, that fight in you, there was no stopping that. And that rattlesnake could have physically hurt you, but in most cases, when we're talking about this type of fear, personal fear, that's not going to physically harm us. So
part of that, I was going to say, part of that is having good self-esteem as well. I think, if I may, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, we talk about having, Les Brown talks about having grit, true grit, which is, the friend of courage and all those kinds of things. And I totally agree. But part of that, this whole concept of I'm powerful, we might feel fear, but we do it anyway. I had an experience down in Houston several years ago with my son, Ben. He works for Chevron down there, and he wanted to show me where he worked. And so we went to downtown Houston. Now, those of you on the call, all of you live in, big cities, and, Chicago, good grief, huge. Houston is huge. And we went downtown, and here are these two giant high-rises. They're all glass. There's like a walking bridge between the two of them way up. I don't know how many stories up, but this glass walking bridge between these high-rises. And we were in the car, and I looked up, and I mean, they're incredible buildings. And I said to Ben, my son, were you a little intimidated when you had to come here your first day of work? And he looked at me, and he looked up, and he said, no. Well, I would have been, but there you go. I am powerful. Self-esteem makes a lot of difference. It helps with the courage.
it absolutely does. And when I coach my clients, we really talk about determination and having that determination and that why that we can push through even when we're tired, overwhelmed, or even just uncomfortable. And unfortunately, it doesn't mean that if you overcome that fear that you are going to win the whole ball game. But it does mean that you will be stronger to play the next inning. And, I remember the first time that I did a webinar, Bob. The first time I did a webinar by myself, I was so panicky. I actually broke out in hives. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know how to move the slides. I mean, it sounds crazy to me now because it's almost secondhand. But that first time, I wrote out the entire script word for word because I was afraid that I would freeze, that I wouldn't know what to say, that I would say it wrong, that people wouldn't understand my message, that they wouldn't like the message. Any possible scenario came to mind just because I was doing a webinar. And of course,
Yeah.
I did it, and I did succeed. And I even got, afterwards, I got some kudos from some of my the people on the webinar and some of the people that knew how afraid I was, saying, hey, it went okay. So I prepared myself to be powerful. And I think that is such a huge message, that preparation a lot of times can get you through, just like preparing to talk to a customer on the phone or face to face. Do you remember the first time that you spoke to a possible synergy customer about for our time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The thought that came to my mind as you were sharing that was, you pray like it's all up to God, and then you work like it's all up to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gosh, we're kind of pushing it time-wise, Judy. I was going to share a little thought about, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. We had a memorial service for our oldest son here at our home, on the 28th of September. And in the process of visiting with our other kids, it's like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And our youngest son, Spud, who is now a captain in the United States Army, said, I'll do the life sketch. I'll do that. And no one wanted to. Nobody wanted to have to stand up there and talk about Gabe. It was just too hard. And when he stood up and shared his remarks, the first thing he said was, "We can do this. We can do this." He was saying it more to himself than anything else, but everyone there got it. We can do this. And then he went forward with courage and shared the thoughts that he needed to share. We can do hard things. You know, it's a part, I think, a part of us inherently that we can do hard things. We may feel fear, but we can work through it. We are powerful, Judy.
We are powerful, and having that courage. A lot of times, the courage, our own courage, is going to help others. And I know what he said, Bob, helped everyone else in that room. That together we can do this. Together we can have the courage, because really growth isn't comfortable. It's not.
No, it's not. It's not.
But you know,
that girl looks more comfortable than that guy, though, doesn't she?
Well, she's making him grow, I guess.
Yeah, she's making him squirm. Yeah, we've all been there. That's for sure. We've all been there.
So, and I think we just, you know, we need to pay attention to the fears that we have, and not do the fight, flight, or freeze. More the fight, I guess, but just look at what they are, and not to avoid them, but to address them and figure out what we're going to do when we have a fear, no matter how little or how big it is. And, you know, I believe that the more successful you are, the bigger your obstacles are. That I get to do things now that I would never have thought of doing several years ago. And I would have really frozen or run away from some of the challenges that I have. But as we grow, we can handle more and more. And so just because we've overcome a fear doesn't mean that fear is gone.
Yeah.
You know, fear continues.
Well, getting a little feedback on my phone. Sorry. Are you hearing that too, Judy? Is that just my phone?
That's just your phone, Bob.
Okay. All right. When I was looking at your slide presentation earlier this week, something came to my mind as well when I was looking at this. We talk about fear and the way we respond to things and how uncomfortable growth can be. But facing those fears, and a few years ago I was on Mount Rainier. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mount Rainier in Washington, but it's a gloriously beautiful mountain. It is huge. It is really big. And I was there with a group of other adults, but a whole bunch of young men that we took up there to hike. And we camped on the Ohanapakash River, and beautiful spot. And we went down on the river one day to swim. It was hot. And the moment I got there down onto the river with these other guys, one of the other guys that was down there said, "Okay, have you ever been here before?" I said, "No." He goes, "Okay, this is the initiation. Come with me." And we started hiking up the side of this mountain. And we got way up there, and he says, "You got to jump in the river. That's your initiation here." Well, it was a long way down. And I'm not real comfortable with heights to begin with. And it was a long ways down. In fact, the guy behind me refused to go. And my friend says, "Now, when you jump, Bob, you got to jump far enough out so you can touch the leaf on that tree right there that you can see, so that when you hit down on the river, you don't hit the rocks." That's not a real comfortable situation, right? And I'm a little afraid of heights anyway. And about that same time, I heard his wife down below say, "Okay, Bob, got the cameras ready." It's like, what to do? So I jumped. And yeah, I was scared to death. But boy, what an experience that was. To take that leap off that cliff into the river and not die, you know, it was awesome. I've never forgotten that. And, you know, courage isn't, you know, you can still be afraid, but you take action anyway. I guess that's where I want to go with that. You can be afraid of something, but the end result of being courageous and going after it, even though you're afraid of it, is really thrilling, or it can be. Anyway, don't be afraid of being afraid, right?
Don't be afraid of being afraid. And in our synergy businesses, we have to look at what we're afraid of, how we want to grow, how uncomfortable it is, and whether we are willing to take the step to become more comfortable in whatever area that is. And when you do overcome your fears, that's where the success lies. That's where everything you want is on the other side of that.
That's kind of the history, or the MO of Synergy Worldwide, isn't it? When you stop and think about it, the whole Dan Higginson experience, what he's gone through, the ups and downs of launching the company in Japan initially, and kind of the ups and downs, and having some people on board that didn't do a good job, or the problems that Synergy had to face earlier on not with the products, just with management running the company. But always Dan Higginson moved forward. I think he may be fearless, that guy. I'm not sure, but that's a company. Synergy Worldwide has faced some struggles through the years, never with their product, but certainly with the business. The business itself. But always moving forward. And I'm proud to be a part of Synergy Worldwide. It's really, I think, some of the biggest personal growth that I've had in my life has come this last 10 years since I've been involved with Synergy Worldwide. It's been the people that I've met and worked with, the books that I've been able to read, these experiences. You mentioned the first webinar. I remember the first conference call I ever got on. Bonnie and I sat side by side each other on a chair, holding the phone between us, making our very first conference call. I was afraid to push the buttons. I was afraid I was going to do it wrong trying to get on the conference call. I know it seems silly, like your webinar story, but that's a part of that growth. And, what's a conference call today? You just dial in and talk, It didn't feel that way the first time, though. So growth isn't comfortable, but we learn as we go along. It's great. It's awesome. This is a personal growth business, really. Network marketing is.
Yes, and I guess what we need to do is to figure out where we are and where we want to be, and not compare ourselves to other people and their success, because they've had challenges along their way also. And we need to just trust in who we are and who we want to be.
Hi, Judy and Bob. I just want to say that thanks for taking another Les Brown book and bringing it to life, so to speak. I might have mentioned before that he is one of my motivational speakers. He's my favorite motivational speakers. And I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times. And the one thing that I remember is his early book, It's Possible. What a powerful speech that was. And I've been a follower of him ever since. So I thank you for talking about fear. And we all do have those fears when we're looking to go into other areas, the fear of not being good enough. So I thank you for doing this presentation today.
Oh, you bet.
You're welcome.
Yeah, of all of the self-help books that I've read, I think that Les Brown is the easiest to read. It's the most down to earth, it seems like to me anyway. I enjoy reading his stuff. He has good stories to share. All of the information that he shares makes perfect sense. Easy to wrap your head around, and I really appreciate him. It's helpful. It causes, as I've read through this book a couple of different times, but every chapter I read, it causes me to reflect on something from the past. And that's a good thing. We can learn from the past. And so I really do appreciate him as well. Donald, thank you for sharing that.
And just one other thing, if I may, Judy's story that you talked about of network marketers getting up and saying how much you're making and that kind of stuff. I've been there, followed individuals around, and they would move from company to company until I got into Synergy. And although it was not a product initially that you make anything, you had the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping others. And I stayed with it, and it's the only one that has ever brought me any financial, if I may, success, so to speak. So I again, glad that you brought this story alive.
Well, you are welcome. And it is so refreshing to me to be in a company where money is not the number one benefit of success. It is helping other people and helping them with their health. Just absolutely an amazing feeling. And the money becomes secondary.
Oh, absolutely. It has changed my direction for sure.
Yeah, years ago when we were first introduced to Synergy worldwide, the folks that we were talking to at the time went down to an open house at Synergy corporate offices, and I couldn't go. I was tied up with something, but Bonnie went. And there was some real trepidation. We'd been approached to do multi-level marketing before, but we had always abstained from it. And there were a lot of reasons for that. But Bonnie went down just to listen. And she called me from Synergy corporate office, and she said, "Bob, this is different. This isn't like what we've seen in network marketing before. This is a different kind of a company. These people are concerned about health and wellness, about the products and the quality of the products." She said, "No one has even talked about money since I've been here." And that was our introduction, really, to Synergy corporate, that it wasn't all about who makes the most money. It was about the value of the products that are marketed. So it's different. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Donald. Any other questions?
Not from me, thanks.
Well, Judy, I think we're done.
I think we're done. I thank you so much, Bob, for sharing your stories. I love it, hearing about your life and the things that you've gone through, and it makes it real.
Yeah, thanks. Same to you. Thanks, everybody.